Zombies. I know when some of you heard we were doing a series on zombies, you got pumped and thought, yes, Carl's going to prepare me for World War Z. I'm going to fight the Walking Dead. Mosaic will be ready for the zombie apocalypse. It is unbelievable to me how obsessed our culture is with zombies. It started in 1968 with the movie Night of the Living Dead. A lot of us got our first exposure to zombies from Michael Jackson Thriller in the 80s. Today it's just gone crazy. Movies like Zombieland and 28 Days Later. World War Z, featuring my stunt double, Brad Pitt, grossed over $500 million worldwide. The Walking Dead is the highest rated show in the history of cable television. People are obsessed with zombies. I even read in the news just a couple weeks ago, some small town on the West Coast has an annual zombie walk where anybody who wants to can dress up in their zombie gear and participate in this parade through this small town or whatever. But a dad was driving through town while the zombies were crossing an intersection. They started hitting and banging and pushing on his car, but he had little kids in the back seat. They got completely freaked out. So the dad tried to kind of get through the crowd and run away, but he ended up running over a 64-year-old woman dressed up as a zombie. Which begs a question. What 64-year-old woman dresses up and takes part in a zombie parade? Like, can you picture the granddaughter talking to her that morning? Hey, Granny, what are you doing? Well, I got to go, honey. I'm putting on my blood-stained clothes and my stitches all over my face. Got to get ready for the annual zombie walk. Bye. How's it work? But I got to tell you, I'm not really into zombies. I'm not. I think I'm the one person in this country who doesn't watch zombie TV shows and zombie movies. I just don't get it. Some of my friends said, a year ago or whenever it was, oh, Carl, we just saw an awesome movie. We even went back to theater and saw it again. You've got to see it. I said, what's it called? They said, World War Z, and they started telling me about it. I said, thanks, but no thanks. In fact, I looked up on YouTube the Honest trailer about it. I don't know if you've seen these things called Honest trailers, but here's how it described World War Z. The main character is Jerry Lane, who's just your average, everyday, scarf-wearing, Spanish-speaking, airplane piloting, sharpshooting, skull-bashing, armor crafting, arm-chopping, prisoner interrogating, surgery-doing, slow-mo vision-having, antidote-making, eagle-eyed, stay-at-home dad. Watch Brad Pitt survive an unsurvivable apocalypse thanks to a constant stream of life-saving coincidences like never hitting traffic in the middle of mass hysteria, finding an RV with the keys and a loaded gun inside, fast zombies who slow down as soon as they're about to catch him, surviving a car crash, surviving a plane crash, surviving a spike through his stomach, and shooting up with a randomly picked virus that happens to be curable while also serving as zombie camouflage. Thanks, but no thanks. So when our creative team came to me and said, hey, Carl, we've got a great idea. Let's call this next series Zombie Life. I said, you've got to be kidding. What are you talking about? They said, well, Carl, remember the theme verse you told us this whole series was based on. Read it again. It fits perfectly in line if we call this series Zombie Life. So look at it. They were right. Romans chapter 12, verse 1, our theme verse for the series says this. And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. It uses that word sacrifice. Let me break this down. In the Jewish culture in which he's writing for several thousand years, they've been offering animal sacrifices. They would kill an animal to make atonement for their sin. We don't do that today because Jesus is our perfect sacrifice. He died to set us free. But Paul tells us to offer our bodies as living sacrifices. Now, I've never seen an animal sacrifice, but I imagine if you're killing an animal, it's not just going to sit there. It's going to try to get away. So what Paul is saying to us in contrast is we, as followers of Christ, willingly climb up on the altar and willingly give our lives as living sacrifices for God and for others every day. We're alive, but we're dead to ourselves. We now live for God and for others. We are the living dead. So we're starting this series today that's going to spend 5 weeks just looking at this one chapter of the Bible, Romans chapter 12. It's packed with tons of application. If you want to know the secret to changing your behavior, it's in Romans 12. If you want to know how to respond when you're going through a hard time, Romans 12. If you want to know how to react when people treat you bad, Romans 12. If you want to know how to figure out God's will, Romans 12. If you want to figure out to what extent you need to conform to be like everyone else and to what extent you need to be your own unique person, it's Romans 12. This chapter is really, if this is all you had on how to follow Jesus, I think you could spend a lifetime mastering this chapter. And if you did master it, you'd probably be more like Jesus than anybody I know. It has so much in it. In fact, I know a couple guys at Mosaic who meet together regularly for accountability, check in on each other, and they challenged each other recently. Let's memorize Romans chapter 12 together because they know if we live this out, we're going to be doing pretty good. So today, we're going to open this series, and very simply, what I'm going to do today is prepare you for when you have a storm in your life. There's that saying you may have heard that everybody's either coming out of a storm, or you're in the middle of a storm right now, or you're getting ready to go into a storm. And what we're going to learn today from the first couple of verses of this chapter is how we can be ready for when the storm hits. Here's how it starts, verse 2. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Now look at the second sentence of that. It talks about knowing God's will. We would all want that, even if you're a skeptic. If there's a God who has a will, you'd want to know that. We spent an entire series earlier this year asking, how do we know God's will for our lives? So he says, then you will learn to know God's will. So what's before the then? He says this, don't copy the behaviors and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Let's break this down. The first part says, don't copy anybody. We like that. We don't want to copy anyone else. We want to be individuals. Did you hear recently about the Russian billionaire who cloned himself? Did you hear about this? Apparently he got rich from diamonds. I didn't recognize his name from any like world's richest list or something, but he was so in love with himself that he had cloned embryos of himself made, 12 different ones. He implanted them in 12 of his cousins, and they all gave birth to 12 healthy babies. And I've kind of been taking a break from the news for the most part. I've been out of the loop. I thought, man, what is our world coming to? People cloning themselves? This is unbelievable. But then I found out it was just a hoax. There's no Russian billionaire cloning himself. This was just some internet fake story. No one's cloning. But I got you, didn't I? Saw some of you rolling your eyes and shaking your head right along with me. Human cloning sounds sketchy, but don't we clone ourselves every day? I mean, sure, we don't do it on a DNA level, but we clone our actions, habits, hobbies, jobs, parenting, the way we dress, even our spirituality from other people. We act like they act. We do what they do. We think like they think or don't think like they don't think. The problem is we end up settling for the exact same life as everybody else. Mike Bro said it like this. He said, I meet so many bored people just doing the same stuff every day. It never changes, just the same old life. You get up at the same old time, shut off the same old alarm clock, walk in the same old bathroom, look at the same old face in the same old mirror, jump in the same old shower, dry off with the same old towel, put on the same old clothes, walk down to the same old kitchen, get the same old bowl, eat the same old cereal, listen to the same old news, kiss the same old wife, get in the same old car, drive the same old way to the same old job, sit at the same old desk, listen to the same old boss tell the same old jokes the same old way, clock out at the same old time, get back in the same old car, drive back that same old way to house, pull in the same old garage, walk back in the same old kitchen, sit down and eat the same old dinner, fall asleep in the same old chair, watch the same old reruns, get up and go to the same old bed, ask the same old wife the same old question and get the same old answer, roll over, hit the same old alarm clock, get up and do the same thing all over again. Isn't that what you're created for? Is that what you're created for? I don't think so. But that describes a lot of our lives, doesn't it? And Paul says, don't copy other people. Translation, create instead of conform. Create instead of conform. We need to rediscover a truth of how we were created. Genesis chapter 1 says that when God created humans, he created us in his image. The only thing we know about God up until that point is that he is a creative God. I believe that to be made in God's image means not just that you're a unique creation, not just that you're different from every human who's ever existed in history, but that also that you are creative. You are created to create. I know some of you hear this and you say, Carl, wait. I'm not creative. I don't paint, I don't sculpt, I don't compose poetry, I don't write music, I'm not creative, and I don't want to. I get that. I'm not saying you have to be a full-time artist to be creative. In fact, that's a myth I want to destroy. God created you to be creative in everything. God created you to be creative in parenting, creative in fulfilling your homework assignments, creative in what you cook for dinner, creative in how you fix cars, creative in the business model you come up with, creative in how you coach lacrosse. We're taught to conform, we're taught to copy, but Paul's saying you create, and when you're creative, you're worshiping. You were created to create. So I just wonder, I don't know, but I wonder if some of the problems in your life are because you're conforming, not creating. I wonder if the reason you're having problems with that one kid is you're trying to treat him like every other kid. I wonder if the reason your new business venture isn't working is because you're trying to do it the exact same way you did your last business venture. I wonder if the reason you can't get in shape is because you're doing what somebody else told you to do, and it's fun for them, but it's not fun for you. I wonder if the reason you don't like your job is because it's what your parents picked out for you. It's not what God gifted you to do. I wonder if the reason you're stressed by finances is because you're conforming to the commercialized competition of your neighbors. Paul says create instead of conform. Now, I could preach an entire sermon on being creative. I am passionate about that. But Paul, in this verse, takes it a layer deeper. Let's look at it. He says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. I got that. But let God transform you into a new person. That sounds great. How do we do that, Paul? It's different than what I thought. He says, by changing the way you think. By changing the way you think. Somebody illustrated it for me like this one time. They said, Carl, it's like an iceberg. If you picture an iceberg, there's 10% of it roughly that's above water, above the surface that you can see, but the majority of an iceberg is below the surface. That's where 90% of it is. Similarly, when you see someone, you see their actions, but someone's actions really only represent about 10% of who they are. The thing that's driving those actions, their beliefs, their thoughts, are the 90% below the surface that you don't see. Every fear, every decision, every action is ultimately based on a belief. Paul's saying what we know to be true. To change someone's actions, you change what they believe. You change what they think. So Paul says first, don't copy the behaviors and customs of this world. Don't be a clone. Don't be a copy. The way you do that is change the way you think. Change what you believe. So the question I had is, well, what does the world believe? Okay, if I'm supposed to be creative, the way I be creative is change the way I think, so I can't think and believe like the world does. What does the world believe? What the world believes is moralistic, therapeutic deism. This is the primary religion of our country today. Let me break it down. It's moralistic, meaning it's a list of rules. Do this, don't do this. Think like this, don't think like that. Act like this, don't act like that. The list can be different. It's what you feel is right or wrong. A don't on a lot of people's lists is don't tell me what I should have on my list, but everybody has their list of do this, don't do that. It's therapeutic, meaning it's all about me. What's good for me? I need to help me out. It needs to make me feel better. And it's deistic. Deism just refers to the idea that there's a God, maybe, but it doesn't really do anything. He might have created the world, but that's kind of it. He, she, or it is not involved with its creation, so we can just do whatever we want. Christian Smith is the researcher who came up with this term. He did it after interviewing thousands of teenagers in our country, and he published something that said, this is the primary religion of the younger generation in the United States. This is what most people believe. To expand it further, he listed the 5 tenets of belief of moralistic therapeutic deism. I want to read them for you. A God exists who created the world and watches over human life. God wants people to be nice to each other. The goal of life is to be happy and feel good about oneself. God doesn't need to be a part of your life unless you have a problem God can fix. And good people go to heaven when they die. Here's the problem. This doesn't work. And it's based on faulty assumptions. I want to list for you 3 reasons I know this is a false religion. Number 1, it's easy. Anybody could fall into this because there's no sacrifice. Anything in life worth having requires hard work and sacrifice. Jesus sacrificed himself for us. We, therefore, sacrifice ourselves for other people. Also, this is about me. It all revolves around me. That's our selfish nature. If we could invent a religion, this is what it would be. That's what sin is. It's putting myself above everyone else. It's the attitude that says, I don't have to follow God, but if I'm in trouble, I'll call on him to hook me up with a favor. Some of you walked in Mosaic today thinking, I'm in trouble. I know what I'll do. I'll go to Mosaic and God will hook me up. No, Jesus says you reap what you sow. And Jesus teaches that if you want God's grace, that you give your life to him. Most importantly, this doesn't help me when I'm in trouble. This is about a God who's absent, who's uninvolved in the life of his people, who's almost incapable of helping us. If God doesn't have a specific plan of redemption for the circumstances I'm facing, for the trials I'm going through, the burdens I'm carrying, what's the point? This is great if things are going well in my life, but when things turn south, this doesn't help me. When the long-term relationship ends, when the room that's supposed to be the nursery remains empty, when no matter how hard you try to reconcile, the family remains estranged, when your major in school might as well be loneliness, this can't help you. Let me give you a stark warning. Some of you looked at that list and you thought, isn't that what Mosaic teaches? Isn't that what I'm supposed to believe? No. No. If you looked at that and you thought that's what following Jesus means, you need to investigate your faith. You need to read books by C.S. Lewis, Tim Keller, Philip Yancey, Hugh Ross. See, following Jesus is hard because I give my life up to follow him. Following Jesus is about others because in his name I serve others when it's inconvenient, which, by the way, inconvenient makes it true service. Following Jesus helps me when I'm in trouble because he's redeeming my circumstances in heaven for all eternity and in the here and now. Jesus commands us, love the Lord your God with your mind. Christians cannot settle and become dim-witted, shallow-thinking, cliche-giving, real-life avoiding, unrelatable robots whose faith would fit better on a bumper sticker in a Christian bookstore than around real people who are undergoing real pain in real life. Jesus was the deepest thinker who ever lived. Have you read what he said in the Gospel of John? Forget Plato, Einstein, Da Vinci, Kant, Newton. Jesus is the most intelligent person in history. Don't think of him as a soft white dude with blonde hair wearing a purple sash giving people hugs and high fives. Jesus was a genius. If we are to follow him, we must use our minds. Students, if you think that an emotional high during a worship song is going to make your faith last once you get to college and have a class with a very intelligent professor who starts attacking your faith, you are badly mistaken. You are badly mistaken. If you do not think about your faith to understand how the historical Jesus will make a real difference in your life every day, you will lose your faith in college. If anyone thinks you can check your brain at the door when you walk in church or follow Jesus, you're badly mistaken. If you refuse to think, you will buy into a cheap version of Jesus, like moralistic, therapeutic Deism, and when you face intellectual questions or when life gets hard, it will fail. It'll fail. And then you'll be complaining. Jesus failed. God couldn't sustain me. The church let me down. No, that won't be true because it was never Jesus you ever bought into in the first place. And that's why Paul said, don't copy the behaviors and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Now, here's why you must have a faith that thinks. Because when you experience pain, emotion will not be enough to sustain you. When you experience pain, emotion will not be enough to sustain you. Let me kind of take a detour and tell you a story. A couple weeks ago, my family went to Ohio to spend the week with my in-laws. And so we packed everybody in the van, went back there for a week. Two of my kids were involved in a thing at their church all week. We hung out with the in-laws. It was great. We had a good time. Friday, 2 Fridays ago, 9 days ago now, we were on our way home, loaded everybody in the van. We left at 3:30 a.m. I like to get a real early start because that way everybody will sleep for half the trip and I can get home. We still have a bunch of the day ahead of us. So we left at 3:30 when we hoped to, piled in, everybody went to sleep. I'm driving, listening to podcasts. I'm going 80 plus miles an hour on the highway. We're making great time. We're going to get home before 11 and time for Dad to get a nap and still enjoy the day. So everything's going great. And then I saw her. She ran out in front of me. I killed Bambi. I was going 84 miles an hour in the middle of Ohio, and In an instant, a deer runs from this side of the highway and runs straight at me. We make eye contact. And then I just ran her right over. And as soon as I did, I hollered, "Ah!" And Lindsay jumped up and she goes, Are you falling asleep and driving off the road? Because she thought it was the of, running off the road. And I said, "No, I just hit a deer." And so I took on my podcast and I just freaked out. My heart's racing. And I just keep going because the van's fine. We were all okay. I didn't even have time to brake or swerve or anything. So we're just going down the highway. And I thought, you know what? We're still going to get home by noon. Don't judge me. And we're going to keep this thing going. But then a couple miles down the road, after my heart is still racing, I kind of, in my seat, prop up a little bit and look over the hood. And I said, "Honey, I think part of the deer's still there." Yeah. So I said, "I guess I should check it." So I pull over, and I go around to the front of my van, and I thought I'd hit the thing and run it over. But there's no real nice way to say it. It just planted its entire body through my grill, and I saw 4 little legs sticking out just like this. So I thought, I ain't touching it. We're getting back in the van. We're still going. So we got back in the van. Welcome to Mosaic. We got back in the van, and I just kept going. I thought, I'm going to get some weird stares when the sun finally comes up, but I don't even care. We'd been going 3 hours, so it was too late to turn around and go, back to the in-laws and help fix our car or whatever. So about 2 miles down the road, I'm just thinking, well, this stinks, but this is what's going to happen. But then the temperature gauge in my van just goes through the roof, and it starts going ding, 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 ding. I thought, oh, crap. So I get out, and this time I open the hood and look at it. The whole deer is sitting there. It had pushed my radiator 1.5 feet back, so I knew there was no chance I was getting the couple 100 miles home or whatever it was. So I thought, we are in trouble. We made it to a service station that was in a small town, and I knew I had to get the deer out. I needed to at least be able to look in the engine, pretend like I knew what I was looking at. So I got a pillowcase, and I pulled the deer out. But I got to tell you, I felt really bad. If you're judging me, you should. Because I don't mind killing animals to eat them because they taste good. But I don't want to kill deer in cold blood just because I want to get home quick. So I had a pillowcase so I wouldn't have to touch it. I pulled it out and laid it in the grass, and I took the pillowcase and just laid it over the deer. May she rest in peace. And so we were kind of at a dilemma, we didn't know what to do. We don't know anybody in this small town where we're at. It was 6:30 in the morning, so places aren't even open where we can go see if they can fix our van. We were delayed. I was still feeling horrible. We finally ended up at a body shop, and they gave us a quote. We're like, "Oh, yep, van's totaled. That's not going to happen." So we ended up getting a rental car, squeezed our family into it, drove the rest of the way home to Maryland, and our adventure was over. We got a new van to replace the one that was totaled. And now, every time we get in our new van, my 2-year-old says to me, in all seriousness, "Daddy, don't hit any deer." Shut up, son. But here's the thing. Actually, I have a picture of it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to show you. Here's the thing. I have a point. It didn't matter how much I wanted to get home. That van was broken, and we weren't going anywhere. When you face a hard time, if your beliefs are broken, they're not going to get you where you need to go. They won't. See, one of the best things I do as your pastor is every week I pray over the prayer requests you put on the connection cards. And, I don't have to do that because we have a team of prayers who does that. But it's good for me to do because it is astounding the pain that is represented in this room. Even if you just take one of our 4 services, the pain represented in this room is really overwhelming. And what do you do when you encounter pain? What do you do when the family says you're not welcome here? What do you do when your good friends bury their 4-year-old daughter? What do you do when the number of weddings you've been invited to in the past year exceeds the number of dates you've been asked out on the past 5? What do you do when your sister has been told by the doctor she should be able to get pregnant, but after 8 years of trying, nothing? What do you do when you hear from yet another job, we went with the other candidate? What do you do when a stranger says, you're a miserable parent, and you think they're right? What do you do when you look at your friend's arm and see she's been cutting again? You can't stop her. What do you do when your husband told you the addiction was done, but you check the internet history and you see he's looking at more porn than ever? What do you do when your relative says, my cancer's back? What do you do? What do you do when your dad sits you down after 30 years and says, Mom and I are getting a divorce? What do you do when you catch him lying? What do you do when the doctor says there's nothing he can do? What do you do when she lets you down again? What do you do? We have a great service here every week. We have an awesome band. We plan this. We work hard at this. We have great volunteers. But an hour-long emotional high alone is not enough to get you through those things I just mentioned. Paul says if it's not based on truth, we're pathetic. If the resurrection didn't happen, we should be the most pitied group of people on the planet. I do want you to be comforted emotionally. I do want you to emotionally connect with Jesus in this place. Even me personally, when I'm not preaching, I'm here. If I'm out of town, I'm visiting another church because because the pain around me, I need an emotional connection to Jesus every week. I know some of you don't come every week. I don't understand how you get through it. I don't. But you must have a faith that thinks. Because a storm's coming. A storm is coming. And if you're not ready, if your faith is based on your favorite worship song and a cliche from a Christian bumper sticker, your faith will likely crumble when the storm hits. And we see this in Jesus. See, before Jesus is arrested to be tortured and executed, he's praying. He's sweating blood in a medical condition when you undergo great stress. And he cries out, Father, if there's any other way that this could happen, let it be. Translation, I don't want to do this. His emotions were overwhelming him. He didn't want to do it. So why did he do it? Why did he give himself up to be executed on your behalf? And don't give the cop-out answer, well, he was God, so that's what God did. No, the Bible teaches he was fully God, but he was also fully human. He didn't want to do it. Why did he do it? It's because of what he knew. Because he had said the truth in John 14:6. Jesus told him, I'm the way, the truth, the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. Most of the time when you hear that statement, it's presented as a statement of exclusivity. I think the greater point is it's a statement of hope. Jesus knew the only hope we had of being reconnected to our Creator, the only hope of redeeming our circumstances and our eternity was for God himself to send his Son to die on our behalf. Jesus knew if I don't do this, they have no hope. So in spite of his emotions, in spite of being overwhelmed to the point of death, in spite of his soul being crushed with fear and pain of what was about to take place, he went through with it because he knew the only hope for you was him dying in your place. And if that happened, then he could rise from the grave. If that happened, he could place his perfection on you. He could give you grace and hope and truth and love. So in spite of his emotions, because of what he knew, he died in your place. And that's why we celebrate communion. In a second, here's how we do it. A tray's going to come down your row, a stack of 2 cups. You take them. There's a cracker representing Jesus' body, some juice representing Jesus' blood. You eat and drink those anytime as our band plays. We do not celebrate communion as an empty ritual. We celebrate communion to remind us of the intellectual truth that the Son of God died on the cross to set us free, that he rose to prove he could be trusted, that he offers us life, grace, and hope, so that when we face a trial, we can rest in the hope that he's going to make all things right one day. Jesus died to give you a better life. And yes, it includes eternity in heaven, but it includes the best life right now. God is calling you to a life of creativity, not conformity. God is calling you to a life of knowledge, not ignorance. God is calling you to a faith that is founded on reality, not wishy-washy emotions. God is calling you to seek answers, not refuse to question. God is calling you from a mundane, cookie-cutter, same-old existence into a unique life that is filled with reckless abandon, holy curiosity, everyday creativity, a thirst for truth based on knowledge, and an eternal impact. Listen, last week I stood up here and I gave the rah-rah speech, announced what we're going to be doing in our future. I got all excited about it. You got excited about it too. But that wasn't just a speech I gave one week. That's what I believe. God is using us as a church and as individuals to change this region forever. But what he's waiting for to do it, is for a group of people who will say, God, I'll do it. I will willingly climb up on the altar. I will die for you and for other people every single day. And then God will transform us and he'll change the world through us. We will live by faith. We will be known for our love. We will be a voice of hope that this generation is dying to hear. Give your life to him. Give your mind to him. And let him unleash the creative spirit within you. And through that, he will change the world. Now, here's what I want to do before I pray. I want to close by reading these two verses from a paraphrase of the Bible called The Message. And if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you, go ahead and close your eyes and just listen as I read this and then pray. Go ahead and close your eyes now. So here's what I want you to do. God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what he wants from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you. God develops well-formed maturity in you. Father in heaven, that's what we want. We don't want to become so well adjusted to our culture that we fit in without even thinking. We want something better. We want something that'll provide hope based in reality when the storm comes. God, lead us to be creative. Do that by changing the way we think. And may we be a church that changes this region forever. It is in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.